What the hell is this?
I don't know who sent me this, but considering today I'm doing an episode on a haunted doll, it was a good attempt at a good prank, and I'm not falling for it. If I asked you to name a cursed haunted doll, I'm betting you would all say the Annabelle doll, but did you know that there is another haunted doll that comes in a very close second? Some may even say that he's even more well known.
Robert is a straw-filled, creepy-looking doll with a fabric face that is void of much facial features. He has two beady eyes and a hint of a nose and a mouth, and he is dressed from head to toe in an old white sailor's outfit. Robert can be seen clutching a bizarre-looking stuffed toy dog, which tongue hangs disturbingly out of its mouth and its eyes bulge from its sockets. Robert the doll's story starts in the early 1900s when he was gifted to a young boy named Robert Eugene Otto. It is said that the young boy became unnaturally attached to the doll, and he even went as far as to give the doll his own first name, Robert, and he actually dropped this from his own title, and he became known as Eugene. No one knows much about Robert before he came into Eugene's possession. It's believed that he was made by a company named Steiff, a company who sell teddy bears. Now, I may be wrong about this, but I do believe that Steiff is responsible for one of the very first teddy bears ever produced. They produce a lot of collector's items nowadays. The teddy bears with the nice jointed arms, you know the kind, the golden fur, the ribbon around the neck with a little bell sometimes. My kids actually own two of these teddy bears, which were gifted to them as christening presents. And they are very nice traditional looking bears, and it is believed that Robert was actually made as a shop mannequin for Steiff, and he would actually sit in the window and hold these teddy bears because he was actually the same size of a small child, so it makes sense that this may be true.
And here I have the Steiff teddy bear which belongs to my daughter, which she got when she was christened. Like I said, they are collector's items, so I haven't actually took it out of the bag, but you should be able to see it through the plastic. Now, like I said, it's a traditional jointed teddy bear, and it is said that this is where Robert originated from.
Now, when it comes to the little sailor suit that Robert wears, it is believed that Steiff did not produce this sailor suit with the doll. It is believed that the sailor suit was actually given to Robert from Eugene. It was actually Eugene's suit.
Now, whilst researching this, I did find that there are two different versions to this story. Version number one is that Robert's grandfather simply gifted him the doll.
Version 2 is that the housemaid gave Robert to Eugene and hexed the doll beforehand. Now, there are a few theories as to why she may have done this, and one theory is that she was simply treated very badly by the family and wanted to get her revenge, and did this by gifting the haunted doll to Eugene. Another theory is that the maid had an affair with Eugene's father and became pregnant and gave birth to a baby girl, which later died, and the maid was so traumatized that she used voodoo to trap the spirit of the child inside the doll. People who have visited the house where Eugene grew up have apparently seen the spirit of a small female child, and the disembodied child's giggle is often heard from different rooms in the house.
On other occasions, when the child's spirit has been seen in the house, she's often seen with a very angry expression on her face, also wearing a white nightgown. On other occasions, she has been... Has it gone? I put it there. I must have put it there. You're going in your box. Right, where was I? Yeah.
Now, at first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Eugene just simply liked to play with Robert. Like I said, he had some kind of unnatural attachment to it, but that's not unusual for a child to be attached to the toy. But it wouldn't be long before really strange things started to happen. The first strange occurrence happened one night as 10-year-old Eugene slept in his bed. At some point in the night, Gene was awoken, only to find Robert the doll sitting at the end of his bed, staring straight at him in the dark. And that is when all hell broke loose. Eugene's mother was awakened with a fright as she could hear her son's screams reverberating around the dark house. As Eugene's mother got to his bedroom door, she found that she could not open it. It was being held by some kind of invisible force from the other side. From the other side of the door, she could hear furniture being thrown around the room and smashing into the walls and into the door. But all this seemed to be drowned out by her son's terrified screams. All of a sudden, the door gave way and she finally forced herself into the room, pushing aside furniture, and she discovered her son curled up in a ball on his own bed. A lot of destruction lay all around him. But Robert the doll still sat upright at the end of the bed, staring straight at Eugene.
And despite all of this paranormal activity that Eugene's mother had just witnessed, she still couldn't believe that a doll was responsible. She couldn't get it in her head that this doll could be haunted, and why would she? It's crazy to even think such a thing. And so, whenever a piece of furniture was smashed, whenever an ornament was knocked off the mantelpiece, Eugene was to blame. And of course, Eugene always said the same thing. Robert did it.
Now, like I said, Eugene's parents didn't believe a word of this, but there would come a time when even they couldn't deny that there was something very unsettling about Robert the doll. The way he would just appear in different rooms of the house without explanation. The way he would seem to stare at you with those beady little eyes. And even the way that he could send a chill down the spine of even the bravest man, woman or child. But still, they would simply put it down to an overactive imagination. That is until one day when Eugene's parents overheard him talking to Robert. On this particular day, Eugene was sat up in his room alone with the doll, which isn't all that strange. That's what kids do with the toys. But on this particular day, the parents could hear Eugene chatting to Robert, but nothing could prepare them for what happened next. It would seem that Robert spoke back in a very deep, dark voice. At times, it would seem that Robert the doll could change his expressions, and he could also giggle. But most troublingly, he could move. There was also sightings of Robert moving around in the windows of the house upstairs, made by people passing by outside. And like I mentioned before, Robert seemed to like to smash ornaments around the house, which happened on more than one occasion. Finally, Eugene's parents were starting to get creeped out by the doll, and decided it was best to separate Eugene and Robert by placing the doll in a wooden chest up in the attic. But this didn't stop Robert. They would often find him sat back in Eugene's bedroom or in a window at the front of the house, watching people pass by outside. And so they would once again put him back in the chest and put him back in the attic, only for him to reappear somewhere else in the house. And on the occasions where the doll decided to stay in the attic, the sound of little feet could be heard running around on the attic floor, followed by a child's giggle. As time went by and Eugene grew older, he travelled to New York City in pursuit of a career. He reluctantly left behind Robert the doll, and in the many years Eugene was gone, building a career as an artist, Robert remained at the family home locked up in his parents' attic, in the wooden chest. And this time that is where Robert stayed. The activity seems to stop.
It would seem that Eugene was some kind of catalyst for all the paranormal activity that was going on with Robert the doll. And with Eugene not in the house, Robert simply chose to lay dormant. And notice I said the word chose. I believe that Robert chooses to do whatever he wants, because as we go along in this story, you'll come to realise that Robert the doll does exactly what he wants, when he wants.
Now, as a child, it was like Eugene had become very attached to the doll. The doll never left his side. He took Robert everywhere, and he spent every second of every day with the doll. So when he left for New York City, it was hard for him. He didn't want to leave Robert behind at first, but he did, and eventually, the many miles between them, the separation seemed to help, and Eugene got on with his life. His career in art was very successful, and he met his wife, and life was good. That is until one day when he received a call from home informing him that his mother had sadly passed away. And with this, Gene inherited the house, and him and his wife moved back into the family home. It wasn't long before Eugene discovered the old wooden chest which was covered with dust, sitting alone in the attic. It was as if it was calling to him, urging him to open it once again and become reunited with his best friend. In the end, Eugene couldn't fight the temptation, and he opened the chest, and a flood of memories came back to him as he lifted out Robert's limp body from the box. An overwhelming feeling of attraction came over him, a certain bond he hadn't felt for a very long time. And once again, wherever Eugene went, Robert would surely be there. Whatever room Eugene would go into, living room, dining room, kitchen, bedroom, Robert was always present. And of course, his wife became very aware of this, and she became very disturbed by Eugene's very strange behaviour. Ever since the first time she clapped eyes on the doll, she had an unsettling feeling. She felt the doll watched her with its beady eyes. She started to notice that Eugene had started to talk to the doll, just as he did as a child. His wife often witnessed this firsthand, and understandably, it creeped her out. But Eugene's wife wasn't the only one who noticed something wasn't quite right when it came to the doll. Once again, Robert started manifesting from room to room, making noise and disturbing ornaments and such. His favourite spot was once again sat in the upstairs window watching passers-by outside. In fact, one day a plumber visited the house, and whilst he was working in the upstairs room where Robert liked to sit in the window, he noticed the creepy little doll doing exactly that, sat in the window looking outside. He admitted it gave him the creeps, but carried on working anyway. As the plumber worked, he had his back turned to Robert, and then all of a sudden he heard a shuffle coming from behind him. He turned around to find that Robert was sat on the opposite side of the window. There was no doubt in the plumber's mind that Robert had somehow moved from one side of the window to the other without anybody else being in the room. And with that, the plumber quickly finished his work and got out of the house. Eugene's wife was getting really creeped out by the doll and her husband's behaviour, and she actually had to put her foot down and strongly object to Robert the doll staying in their own bedroom as they slept. So Eugene would create Robert his own room in the attic. His wife also started to notice that Eugene's moods also changed constantly. He could become very hostile and angry and then snap back into his normal pleasant self. Unfortunately, one day Eugene was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, and it is said that when his health deteriorated, he chose to spend most of his remaining days talking to the doll in the attic room of the house, and he did that until the day that he died. Upon Eugene's death, his wife decided to sell the house that in time would become known as the artist's house. Upon completion of the sale of the house, Eugene's wife decided to leave Robert behind in the attic, and I think we can all say we don't blame her. But of course, Robert wasn't happy with this arrangement. A lady named Myrtle Rooter became the new owner of the old house, and one day as she explored the old attic upstairs, she discovered the old tattered doll dressed in the sailor suit, and she decided to bring him down from the attic.
It wouldn't be long before Myrtle discovered she had some kind of attraction to Robert, like a bond, and it wouldn't be long before she started taking Robert everywhere with her. Wherever she went, Robert went, just like with Eugene. And now it would seem that the unnatural bond that had been created between Eugene and Robert had now been created between Myrtle and Robert. And for a while, everything was fine. That is, until Myrtle decided to sell the house. And when she did so, she took Robert with her. It would seem that Robert did not like this arrangement. It would seem that he liked staying in his house, and he didn't take kindly to being taken away. It is at this point that Myrtle's admiration for Robert quickly turned into fear. Fear for her life. She now had a constant uneasy feeling, a feeling of negativity, like the energy was being drained from her. She felt that Robert was now haunting her every move.
And so she becomes so afraid that she decided to donate Robert to the East Martello Museum in Florida, and that is where he is to this very day. After Myrtle donated the doll, she explained to the owner of the museum how she believed that the doll was haunted, and she then went on to tell numerous stories of the doll moving, disembodied voices, footsteps, etc, etc. And she also said that she believed that this doll was fully capable of killing someone if it wanted to. And so, she gladly left Robert there, in that museum, and returned home without him. Exactly 3 months later, Myrtle was found dead. The cause of her death was unknown. Back in the museum, Robert sits behind a glass case where people can come and visit him and say hello, but be aware if you do decide to do this, it is said that if you show any kind of disrespect to Robert in any way, shape or form, or even taking his picture without asking his permission and then thanking him afterwards, your luck could quickly change for the worst. In fact, some people have reported having their picture taken with Robert without asking, and some people have reported that they were disrespectful, and then later they would have some of the worst luck they had ever had in their life, as if a curse had come upon them. Some even claim that the doll seemed to appear in their own home before disappearing again, and the only way to lift the curse was to return to the museum and beg Robert for forgiveness. Many of the staff of the museum have reported strange occurrences with Robert the doll. Some claim that Robert is able to make people feel extremely sick when viewing him, and that his facial expressions often change at will, often into a frown. Staff have also commented how his head will turn and follow them as they walk past his display unit. And at night time, when the lights go out and the museum is closed, it is believed that Robert may leave his glass case and go for a walk, due to his position in the glass case being completely different the day after when the staff return to work. The spirit of a little girl has also been seen walking around the museum after closing, when there's no visitors present. This is interesting because a spirit of a child is also seen at the artist house, where Eugene spent his childhood with Robert the doll. This could also back up the theory of the maid placing the soul of her dead baby girl into the doll. Over the many years that Robert sat in that glass case, the museum have received hundreds, maybe thousands of letters of apologies addressed to Robert. These letters are from people who visited the museum, who believed they didn't show the proper respect to Robert after receiving quite a lot of bad luck after they left the museum.
And to this very day, the museum still receive letters of apology addressed to Robert. That is the end of our Robert the Doll episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I had a blast researching it and No. Am I going to get out of this alive?